Financial Planner, follow us on YouTube.
Brandon Smith. Brandon is the founder and chief strategist behind the Alternative Market Project. His website is altmarket.com, and I am very happy to have him back on the X22 Report Spotlight. Brandon, welcome back to the Spotlight.
Hi, Dave. Thanks for having me back on the show.
Hey, thanks for being here. And I wanted to start off, and I know you do a lot of research into the economy, what's been happening out geopolitically, politically, and I wanted to talk about what is happening here in the country, because we saw what happened in Charlottesville. Now they're pushing the idea to take down statues, remove the Confederate flag. And I wanted to get your take on what you think is happening with the deep state or the cabal, whatever name you want to, call the other faction. What do you think they are trying to do? What is their main goal here in America?
Well, seeing as most of these groups or many of these groups end up, we discover that they've been funded or supported or even completely organized by George Soros-backed institutions. I think what is happening here is a lot of these groups are being created or encouraged by the globalists, leftist groups in particular, being created by the globalists in order to push conservatives, poke at conservatives, enrage conservatives, help to demonize us, and eventually push us, I think, towards a totalitarian response. The temptation is going to be very high for conservatives to respond to the insanity of the left with government power. And I think that's exactly what the globalists want us to do. They want us to sort of abandon our constitutional principles and react with as much anger and totalitarianism as possible, making them right, making us the fascists that they claim we are.
Now, I don't think that we should, strike back. That's my personal opinion. I think everything should be done peacefully, and I think we should stick to the principles of peaceful protests. And if the other side, comes out swinging and things like that, yes, we have the right to defend ourselves, but make it look like they're the ones, or we don't have to make it look like they are the ones who are coming out and causing the riots. They're using the clubs. They're, breaking windows. And we need to change the focus and put it back on them. I wanted to get your take on what you think the group Antifa is. What do you think that group is?
Well, Antifa is essentially I can only go by their behavior and actions, and I think Antifa is basically a classic communist provocateur group. Everything they do is indicative of past communist actions in order to destabilize nations. So if you look at the statue, the Confederate statue issue, what they're doing is classic Maoist cultural revolution. They're trying to tear down pieces of a culture's history, erase the history so that they can then build on the ashes a new history, a new system. This is what they did in China during the Cultural Revolution. The Maoists tore apart museums, destroyed precious historical pieces of historical significance. They attacked professors and academics and anyone who had ties to history and who opposed them. And eventually they started committing mass murder because, it's not enough. Once these people start, they start small. They'll start with statues and then they move on to bigger and bigger things until eventually they decide, well, we got to remove all these people that, have knowledge of these things and are opposed to us. So Antifa is following that classic communist path. In my opinion, I believe that some of these groups, and there is evidence to support this, that some of the specific Antifa groups are being funded by, globalist institutions, especially Soros-owned institutions.
Now, throughout this whole ordeal with Charlottesville, the corporate media has been attacking Trump quite a bit. And, they've been calling him a racist. Why didn't he come out earlier? Why didn't he denounce everything? And everything that I've heard and seen is that he did do this, but they're continually pushing the idea that he didn't. And, all over the corporate media, they're making it look like, he agrees with the neo-Nazis. He agrees with the white supremacists. He agrees with what has happened there. And it looks like they're pushing this agenda to convince everyone that he is all for this. Are you seeing the same exact thing?
No. Actually, to Trump's credit, he spoke against violence on both sides of this sort of silly paradigm. And it's interesting. This is kind of what this is what leftists / communists do. If you don't completely side with them, then you are not on their side. If you don't say, yes, you were completely in the right and we were completely in the wrong, then you are still the enemy in their mind. So he came out and said, that we should condemn violence on both sides of this spectrum. And immediately the leftists and the media interpreted that to mean that he was in support of Unite the Right, which is not what he did. It's funny because, there's been a lot of violence on the leftist side. I mean, we just recently had a congressman shot by a Bernie Sanders supporter. Where was the leftist outrage on that issue? Where was the media outrage on that issue over Steve Scalise being shot? They're spending a whole lot of time on Heather Heyer and the white nationalists as if this is the end of the world. They spent maybe a few days on Congressman Steve Scalise. So this is what the left does. They have a double standard with everything. They double down on everything. It's to us, it seems like complete insanity, and it is. But I think it's insanity with a purpose. I think these people are being aimed at us, at conservatives. They're being used as a weapon to drive us towards a enraged and totalitarian response.
Do you think they're trying to push America into a civil war?
I think that if there was a civil war, it'd be really short-lived, because I don't think the leftists have the I don't think they have the chutzpah or what. Yeah, I don't think that they have the ability to maintain that any kind of insurgency in the United States. I think they would be crushed very quickly, but I think that is the intent. I think that's the globalist intent, is to kind of use them as a weapon, and then throw them to the wolves when the time comes. And conservatives, when they get angry, they do tend to go overboard sometimes. So and we've seen this in the past. We saw this with 9/11 and the Iraq War, and I'm worried that they may be pushing us more towards that neocon sort of ideal or ideology.
So do you think we're going to war with maybe North Korea? Or I know Trump came out and he gave a speech about Afghanistan where we're sending more troops in there. What is your take on what is happening in North Korea and Afghanistan? Well,
I think North Korea is definitely going to happen. Just from the rhetoric I've never seen. I haven't seen rhetoric like this basically since the Second Gulf War, and all it's been doing is expanding, and it feels like an avalanche at this point, and it's just not going to stop. And I don't, in the past we've seen incidences with North Korea that did not amount to anything more than hot air. But this time around, I think it is different. The rhetoric is much stronger, and also something has happened which I've never seen before. which is that China, the Chinese government, which has usually been pretty straightforward and taken a hard stance as far as any incursion into North Korea, China has now left the door open to invasion. They essentially said that if North Korea attacks first, then they will remain neutral during any act to change the regime. I've never seen this before. And the fact that China has suddenly come out with this policy or this position leads me to believe that there will be a war sometime in the near future.
Who do you think is pushing this? Is this the Trump administration? Is it the intelligence agencies? Who do you think is pushing the provocations with North Korea?
Well, this is classic neocon / globalist. I think Trump has either been brought to heel, as some people have said recently, or that he was always kind of under their thumb. But clearly he's playing along with a neocon or a globalist program because, especially in times of economic decline, war has always been used as a major distraction. And turn people away from the real culprits, the banking elites, and get everyone focused on the other, the foreign enemy. And this tension with North Korea is timed perfectly with the current decline in fundamentals in the U.S. economy, and now it would seem that we are seeing a market reversal. It's maybe too early to say for certain, but it looks like we're starting to hit a market reversal. So if the market does completely invert or implode, they're going to have some kind of distraction in the wings, so that people blame that. They blame the outbreak of war. They blame Trump instead of blaming the bankers for the market reversal.
So right now you think that Trump, he's compromised, and he had the meeting with the generals, and he came out on television telling everyone that we're going to be staying in Afghanistan, that we're not going to be leaving just yet. But he did make it very clear that he was going after the terrorists only. We're not nation building. And he also said that, we're not going to announce how many troops or what the missions are going to be. But what do you think he's up to? Do you think we're just going to stay there and this is just a story that he's telling everyone?
Well, it sounds like business as usual to me. It's a very open-ended policy, which means it could change at any given moment. And, he could pull troops. He could add troops. He said no nation building, which I think was he's throwing a bone to the libertarian element of his conservative base. But it just sounds like we're going to be there forever. So that's kind of my takeaway from it. I don't think we're going anywhere for a long time, or until the money runs out, and then maybe we'll leave Afghanistan. But it sounds like we'll be there forever.
So you mentioned that the market it might be reversing right now. Can you just explain what you mean by that?
Well, I think basically what we've seen for the past few years is just a steady bull market. It's hasn't really real volatility has not increased for a long time, and it's almost become so predictable and repetitive that almost anyone can just jump into the market and make money, because all they have to do whenever there is a minor dip, all they have to do is buy that dip, and they make a little profit. So that's a completely created situation by the central bank, by the Federal Reserve. You would never have a market behave that way unless it was being artificially supported through stimulus and through stock buybacks, which are also supported by stimulus and low interest rates. So that's been the predictable behavior of the market for years, and now we're starting to see a shift or a change. We've seen volatility rise. You cannot, people who have been buying the dip, at least in the past week, have not been successful. So I'm starting to see a change in behavior. And I think also the timing of the North Korean situation, to me, indicates that there will also be increased market volatility in the near future. So I think at this point, what we're going to see is about a 10% drop going into maybe late fall. And then whatever event is going to happen to cover is going to happen sometime in the fall. So I'm thinking more than likely North Korea, but there's multiple others that could be triggered. There's so many staged right now and ready to go. It's impossible to predict which one will be used.
So are you saying that the economy at that time, or are you just talking about the stock market? The stock market is going to come down 10%, and you think they're going to stage an event to say, oh, this is why this is happening? Yeah,
I'm speaking specifically about the stock market, but the general economy has been in massive decline for years. The only portions of the economy that have maintained any semblance of being successful are the stocks and in some cases bonds, and I guess the dollar would be another element. But I believe we're going to see a reversal in all those areas here relatively quickly. The reason I don't see stocks as very important really as far as the state of the economy goes, but a lot of people unfortunately do. That's all they look at. They look at the health of the stock market in order to gauge where the economy is at and how healthy the economy is. And so, and the banking elites know that. They know that all they have to do is artificially kick up stocks whenever they want people to stop paying attention to the economy. And they've been rather successful in that regard. So, I think there's coming a point where first of all, they can't keep it propped up forever, and they don't plan to. The Fed has stated, despite some rumors in the mainstream media, the Fed has stated pretty clearly that they're going to continue hiking interest rates and that they're going to start reducing their balance sheet. So if they do that, there will be no money going into the stock market anymore through the central bank, and the market will be sort of left to its own devices. And at that point, that's when everything will start crashing exponentially. So the bankers are pulling back, and they're pulling the plug on a lot of the support. It seems to me because number one, they know they can't support it forever, and number two, they have a greater agenda in mind, which is creating some chaos and generating more centralization out of that chaos.
Do you think that the Fed, once the economy starts to come down or they start bringing it down, do you think they're going to make a case to start stimulus once again?
It's possible, but I think when they do broach that topic, it will be far too late, and they will wait until it's too late for any kind of bull market reversal or any kind of support to matter. I honestly think that they're just going to continue raising rates into the crisis, which is what they have always done. If you look at the history of the Great Depression, this is what the Federal Reserve did. They artificially, through low interest rates and other measures, they artificially pumped up the stock market in the 1920s. Then when things started to crash, they started raising rates, and they made the Depression much worse and much longer than it would have normally been. So they've done this before. I think it's safe to say that that's what they're doing again.
So do you think this time around, you're saying that the market's going to come down 10%. Is it going to be worse than 2008? Is it going to be the same as 2008? I mean, everyone keeps asking, how bad is this going to get? I mean, am I going to lose all my money in the bank? Am I going to lose my job? Is my pension, are they safe? When you see this and you've done your research on this, how bad do you think this is actually going to be?
Well, as far as stock markets are concerned, I would say it's going to be as bad or worse than 2008, 2009, definitely. Except in this case, the markets will not bounce back because either the Fed will not stimulate, or they will they will broach the topic of stimulus and try to jawbone markets up. It won't work. People won't believe them anymore that stimulus measures will have any effect. So it won't matter anyway. I just think that they won't try to stimulate the markets back up again. So for stocks, I think it'll be very similar to 2008, 2009. As far as the rest of the economy goes, everything is already in serious decline as far as fundamentals. We see a little bit of a housing bubble again. I think that will implode. The auto bubble is imploding as we speak. So a lot of these problems that we had back in 2008 never really quite went away. They really just got worse over the past 8 years. It's just that everybody stopped talking about them and they just hyper-focused on.
Do you think that we'll have the same thing that we had back in 2008 where the credit markets froze up? Do you think that's a possibility?
Yeah, yes, in certain sectors, yes. And I think that we will see, I mean, it will get to the point, I think it will get to a crisis level scenario where you will see a lot of businesses break down. You'll see certain necessities like freight systems, I think, will be reduced in efficiency. A lot of them will go bankrupt. I think, grocery stores will start to see thinner shelves. But I don't think this will happen overnight. A lot of people, they watch too many movies, too much TV. They think they wake up one morning and the zombies have taken over. That's not how this is going to be. I think it's going to be a slow grind down, and a lot of this will happen in stages. It might happen faster than it has been happening, like over the course of a year or 2 years. Rather than over the course of 8 years, but it's not going to happen overnight. And I do think that things will collapse enough to where it is pretty miserable for most people. But government entities, I think, will maintain their structure. And I do think that the goal here is eventually to institute martial law in the United States with using social division and instability and economic instability as a rationale.
Do you think the dollar will survive this? Will the U.S. dollar still be the reserve currency of the world?
No, I don't. And I think that is actually going to happen much faster than a lot of people expect. I think that the IMF has staged their special drawing rights basket perfectly. I think that the next stage of that shift away from which Christine Lagarde of the IMF calls the Great Global Reset or the Great Economic Reset. The next stage is to move into cashless systems. And it's funny because back in 1988, when The Economist predicted or basically stated that there was going to be a global currency, a one world currency by 2018, I don't think they necessarily knew what the mechanism was going to be specifically. But a lot of people, when I use that article as evidence, they say, well, where is this currency? What is the currency going to be that people are going to trade? I don't see anything that could replace the dollar. Well, it actually already exists. It's cryptocurrencies. and the blockchain system, which central banks and international banks are investing in and building systems around like crazy right now. So I really believe that the blockchain technology and cryptocurrency is going to be the new one world currency. It's already in existence. It's already gaining traction. And ultimately, the IMF will, through the SDR system, introduce a blockchain type currency, cryptocurrency, if it doesn't already exist and we just don't know it yet.
So you don't think the cryptocurrency will be decentralized where the people control it, not the central banks? You think the central banks somehow, some way are going to control the blockchain system that we're going to be using?
Yes, or I mean, really, the way the blockchain technology is set up, and this is a major misconception that's been spread by a lot of people, in Bitcoin, the idea that this is an anonymous system. That's actually not true. A lot of major Bitcoin supporters have been forced to admit that Bitcoin is not anonymous, that the blockchain ledger records every transaction regardless, and that the federal government has been able to, whenever they want to, track down criminals or whoever they want to track down using the blockchain ledger, even if they tried to cover their tracks. So the real key to this technology is that it removes all anonymity. It removes all privacy from trade. And that's a big deal. You might not think, well, I bought apples from this guy down the street, that who cares? But when you're dealing with government and you're dealing with an entity that has the power to enact vengeance on you for your political views or whatever else, privacy in trade is important. Privacy and how you interact, who you interact with, the things you buy, that's very important. I think that's kind of the key to blockchain technology, and that's the control, is the fact that there is no privacy in this system. And I would say if people are going to support blockchain technology, if they're gonna back this, then they really need to start questioning the idea of privacy within this system and start demanding it. And if you can't get privacy in trade, then you need to drop that system. And that goes for Bitcoin or anything else. If it's not providing privacy, then it's not a system that we should adopt.
Just one point on the cryptocurrency. I mean, from my understanding, isn't the cryptocurrency where, your name's not really attached to it? I mean, I can have an offline wallet and my name is not on it. Nobody knows who I am. My cryptocurrency is offline, and I'm not dealing with like Coinbase. I'm not dealing with Bittrex or any of the exchanges once it goes to my offline wallet. And, isn't that kind of private?
Well, anything digital leaves a footprint. So you're talking IP addresses, you're talking other digital footprints. And, if all I can say is the feds have numerous times tracked people who did cover their actions just like you described. I can look up a list of different people that have been arrested using Bitcoin for various, criminal activities. And people who were knowledgeable, people who knew what they were doing as far as covering their tracks, they were still caught, they were still arrested by the feds. So until I see a crypto system that the feds cannot do that, where they can't, where the feds start to complain because they're not able to catch these people, I just can't recommend it. I certainly can't call it private.
So where do you think from now until whenever, I think you said the fall, how is this going to play out? Moving forward, you said in the fall, we're going to start seeing, the stock market come down. And you said this is going to happen in different phases. In a summarized version, what are these phases that you're talking about?
As far as the stock markets, or just
as the economy like crashes, like you said, in this fall, we're going to have a 10% stock market crash. like what is the next phase after that? And there's is there another phase after that?
Well, I think we'll enter into, the distraction phase. I think it will either be North Korea, it will be Syria, it'll be Venezuela. Somewhere we're going to have a cover event or a distraction event. At that point, I think things will move rather quickly. I do think once you start to see markets drop, you're going to start to see an increase in civil instability, because for some reason people just psychologically attach themselves to the behavior of stocks, and when you start to see stocks drop, you start to see people panic. So, and also start acting out their previous conflicts that were maybe not quite as violent. They start acting more violent. So I think we'll start to see more social instability. I think that that will, be going into the end of fall. With wintertime, it's hard to say because, things get cold. People don't want to go out and brawl in the streets as much. But at that point, once we have, say, North Korea kicks off and we do have this major distraction, I do think we'll see a very quick reversal in the stock market towards the end of the year. I think that will, it's hard to say what percentage, but I think initially 10%, and then from then on it'll be a steady decline without any major bounces. After that, I think we will start to see China and Russia completely dumping the U.S. dollar and U.S. treasuries dumping the dollar as world reserve. Now, at that point, I'm really not sure how bad things will get. I suspect that it will be pretty bad, but there will be enough stability to maintain government structure. But it's hard to say if you have civil instability and the dollar losing world reserve status at the same time. I think a lot of people will be, a majority of people in the U.S. will enter poverty, I think, at that point. And that would be going through 2018 is where we'll see just a mass explosion in poverty. After that, I really can't say.
Brandon, thank you very much for being on the X22 Report Spotlight. Once again, how can people see your work?
You can visit me at alt-market.com. That's alt-market.com.